Have you ever felt yourself get in a pickle?
You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. Pickleball. It's a super fun game, and it's becoming more and more popular. You have probably heard of the game with the pickleball courts going in all sorts of neighborhoods around the country, often even replacing tennis courts. This game is extremely popular and fun to play.
And of course, if you lose without scoring anything, you got yourself into a pickle, because that's what it's called.
Yeah, if the score is 11-0, that's considered a pickle.
Okay, so let's talk about what this game is, because there might be some listeners who, although they've heard of pickleball, they don't really know how is it played. And for those who do like pickleball, any discussion of it is just a lovely, exciting discussion. So, what is pickleball?
Well, it started out in the 60s. Some bored families on Whidbey Island in Seattle area, across the bay from Seattle, decided that they would invent a game between ping pong, badminton, and tennis to keep their kids from being bored.
Yeah, it's really kind of a clever story how they just went out onto the court that they had. Was it a tennis court or a volleyball court?
I think it was just a paved piece of asphalt outside their little cabin there on Whidbey Island.
And the dads, got together. People were kind of bored. It was one of those probably overcast days, and they were trying to figure out, well, what can we do to have some fun? And they just got into it and started making up this game. It's quite incredible story. People started playing it in their streets, and they started, being asked for, can we get this equipment? And so they started making the equipment just out of plywood and selling off these kits. And now today it's quite a game.
It is quite a game.
And of course, the McPhees have got addicted to it. We've put in a pickleball court, and we very rarely have that court empty at night. It's very well used.
That's right.
But how's the game played? The game is played kind of like tennis, but kind of like badminton. You have to serve underhand. And the key of the game is to get into slow play. I mean, you can bat it back and forth, and those people are called slammers in pickleball. But, the idea is to get really close to what they call the kitchen line, or the no-man zone, which is about 6 or 7 feet from the net, and you have to stay back there, and you just tap the ball very, very gently over the net to your opponents. And if you can keep in slow play long enough, you really set yourself up to get the winning shot.
Right, and the reason that slow play is important because it keeps the ball just barely going over the net. It keeps the other team from driving it back at you really hard. Mm-hmm. And so the slow play, it's a very important part of the game of pickleball. There's even a name for it. It's called the dink. When you just dink it hard enough just to get it back over the net. And it's amazing the lessons that we can learn from this, the parallel that applies to slow play in pickleball. It also applies to our finances.
It does. It's those people that are slower in building their financial acumen and wealth are the ones that usually hold on to it the longest. Goes clear back to the Greek Aesop's fables, who said the story of the tortoise and the hare. And we've always said that life insurance, cash value life insurance that we use, the dividend-paying whole life insurance, is like the tortoise. It's slow, it's steady, and it's setting up that time when you're going to take that winning shot, and not just one winning shot, but multiple winning shots, because you've built this financial reserve. And a lot of people say building up that reserve is just dinking around. Let's get with the business. Let's really get out there. But, those are often the people that are flash in the pan. They might get real wealthy, and tomorrow you'll find them out on the street homeless.
Yeah. And in pickleball, it's well recognized that beginners tend to drive it back and forth. They have a hard time getting into that slow play mode because it's hard once you've started out fast to go slow, but it's so important nonetheless. The professionals will almost always get into that slow play, that dink, before they make the kill shot. It takes a high
skill level to get into that.
Yeah.
It's and so those people that just come in banging, in the financial world. They might make some money initially, but they end up having to come back and do the slow play if they're going to stay in the game long term.
On a recent podcast, we were talking about how banks, when they lend money out, that those loans, that are counted as an asset on their balance sheet along with the deposits that are there. So it actually creates this money out of thin air. And so what happens, as people are using this money is it stimulates the economy. But there are some parallels that we can draw here to the game of pickleball that may help us to understand the flow of money a little bit better in the real world as well. Just creating money out of thin air when you make a loan to somebody, like many banks do, does not help the economy. It inflates the economy faster. So if we look at the game of pickleball real quick, it's important to be able to keep the ball in play. And we could even draw, some fun parallels to the game of pickleball, even going down to the ball, which is called a Franklin. And of course, in our money, we talk about Benjamin Franklins, the $100 bills that we throw around. But in money, you have to be able to keep the money that you have in play as well if you're going to benefit from the flow of that money.
In fact, anyone that's ever accumulated wealth will always tell you that it's more important to keep their money than to get a return on their money. Or another way they say it, we want our money to return to us more important than even earning a return on our money. Mm-hmm. Because if you lose your money, now you got to start all over again.
Yeah.
So when I think about the game of pickleball and you come out to the court and you're all excited and you just decide to slam it around, well, that ball can be very easily hit out of bounds, and now it's not coming back to you. Or in the case of our pickleball court, we have a wall just on the outside of bounds, and sometimes we not only hit the ball out of bounds, we hit it what we call out, because it goes over the wall, and it is definitely out of play for a long time. Either we got to climb the wall and go get it, or we got to just go find another ball because we've hit it out. And so a lot of times people are, if they're not being very careful and cautious, then they're just trying to do these wild slams and they're hitting it out to no return. And that does not keep you in the game.
This reminds me of what Nelson Nash always said that he developed the infinite banking concept for, is to allow people to keep more of the interest that they were losing in that out over the wall type ball. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because whether we're paying cash for something, we're giving up the interest we could have earned on that money. Or if we use someone else's money, we're now paying interest to them that could have been ours. And so he was saying, using the infinite banking concept, the dividend paying whole life insurance policy, to create that reserve of money that we can dink around with. Mm-hmm. That allows us to keep earning interest on our money while we get to use someone else's money. And if we're wise and shrewd and careful, the interests will outweigh each other. Mm-hmm. We have to be careful, though. We have to dink slowly and very skillfully. Otherwise, you just can't say, oh, you go in and borrow from your policy and buy everything with it, because that always doesn't work. You got to do the skill of figuring out, is this going to be worthwhile or isn't it?
Yeah. And the skill of the players is an important part of the game of pickleball. It takes a while to develop that skill.
Certainly. And we have to remember, how do we win a game? Well, we win by scoring points. And it takes multiple scores, multiple gain of points over the game, the period of the game. And of course, you have to do it against your opponent. But the same thing happens in our finances. We have to have wins all along the way. You can't say, oh, I'm just going to come in here, slam, I'm going to win, just with this one hit, I'm going to win the game. No, that doesn't work. You need to get a series of wins. And it's interesting because the more we get wins initially, that really helps us mentally. It helps us in our skills in the game so that we can continue to gain those wins. And it has to be a series of wins to make us win the game. And the same thing happens in the financial industry. Very rarely do you see someone who got something lucky in the beginning and that they have been able to hold that and build on it.
You know, something that's really interesting about the game of pickleball, right now a 16-year-old girl is considered the best pickleball player in the world. She started when she was playing 12 years of age. Her and her mom played doubles. They're the best doubles team in the world, and she's the best singles player in the world. And, you know, this just goes to show you that in the financial world, it's not what we think we know that's wrong. It's what we think we know that ain't so, as Will Rogers used to say. And so the younger that we can help people understand the infinite banking concept and the value of dividend-paying whole life insurance, the better financial player they're going to be in the world, because they're not learning all the things that are supposed to work but really don't. All the lies that we've been told. You know, I think one of the reasons Nelson Nash was so adamant about keeping that interest instead of letting it go away is those interest rates are often the Federal Reserve's way of trying to fight the inflation that they caused. And he was really adamantly opposed to the central bank, the Federal Reserve, because what it does is it allows banks to create money out of thin air every time they make a loan. And then when it gets the economy gets too overstimulated, then they raise interest rates to try to freeze it and slow it down. So they get to play both sides of the aisle, you know. And when we use the financial reserve that the insurance company allows us to build in dividend-paying whole life insurance, the cash values, when we use that money, it does not create inflation.
Yeah.
And so we're stopping that Federal Reserve control of our finances. Can we stop it completely? No, but we can fight back individually.
And that's something that we talked about on a recent podcast, is how, you know, when a bank doubles its balance sheet basically by making a loan out on the same amount of deposit that it also gets to keep as an asset, that becomes detrimental. If we look at the game of pickleball, you know, we can put our extra balls, our extra money, if you will, into a box at the side of the court. And a lot of people will put their money into the bank or into, you know, a tax qualified plan, and they might even put a lock on it. But how much good does that do them to be able to use their money on the court then, if it's all tied up in the box?
Oh, so you're talking about on the court side where we have the box, where we have our where we store our pickleballs. If we just keep
Our
them
Franklins?
in there, yeah, our Franklin pickleballs. If we just store them in there and don't open the box to take it out,
How much good does that do us?
yeah. If there's no ball, you can't play. Yeah.
You know, the other thing, too, is we keep talking that we need to put up a safety net on that wall so we're not losing so many balls going completely out of bounds and over, and we don't get them for maybe a day or two when we climb over the wall.
Yeah, because the
and get
other
'em.
night, John, didn't you go over the wall and you threw back like 6 pickleballs that were just out there?
Yes.
Over the wall.
Every few days, it's something we have to go over do. And it's better if we do it the same day that they go out, because otherwise they sit out there in the sun and get bleached and brittle
Yes.
because they're out of play. They're not
right.
in motion.
That's right. So having safety net would really be advantageous for our pickleball court, but even more advantageous is it for us in our financial play.
It is, and that's where the dividend-paying whole life insurance comes in. It is a safety net that keeps our pickleballs, our Franklins, our dollars in play, even though we don't need to leverage them and take a loan, because they're still helping people in the economy, because the life insurance company uses those dollars to buy bonds, corporate bonds, or to buy commercial real estate. And so it's always in play whether we borrow it or not. And then when we do borrow it, it doesn't create inflation like when we borrow from a bank.
a little while ago too, we talked about, that 16-year-old girl. She started when she was so young with playing pickleball and learned those skills, and now, she's an excellent pickleball player. Then we have the other side where I remember several months ago, some of our kids had gone down to the rec center, the local rec center, and they had played pickleball. And they were talking about the man that they played against, who he could barely walk. He's, elderly, and he could barely move, was really crippled up and took these little tiny baby steps. And he would get up to the kitchen line and play, and he would beat everyone. Because even though he was older, he had been playing and he had mastered the dink, and he was able to perform quite well. So, yes, it's better to learn when you're young, but even if you're older, even if you've had some financial setbacks, some crippling things, you can still learn how to play this game and get the best benefits that you can get at this stage in your finances. So it's not just something that you have to be exposed to when you're young or you're out of it. You can learn all along the way. Now, if that guy could have moved even more, then he would have had other elements of the game on his side too. But at least having that dink, he was very effective on the pickleball court.
Well, we've had a lot of fun today talking about the analogy between pickleball and our finances, but really that's life. If we can draw an analogy to one area that we have a lot of knowledge or skill in, it often transposes to another area. And that's something that we try to do a lot here at Life Benefits, is to help people realize that money is just a tool, and it plays a part in every part of our life. And if we can draw these analogies from the skills and the know-how that we have already and apply it to our finances, we'll be much more successful and much more profitable.
That's right.
And that's kind of what you did in your second book, Tom, Winning Your Financial Game. This is written long before we were aware of pickleball, or when pickleball started taking the country by storm. But Winning Your Financial Game, you compare it to football, you compare it to baseball and basketball, and you talked about your track experience, so you compare it to running a relay, and we use all those different sporting terms, and that's Winning Your Financial Game. That's a great book where you talk about a lot of financial principles and take something people are already familiar with, your favorite sport out there, and apply it to financial things. Because when there's something we don't understand, if we can apply it to something we do understand and take the principles that we know in this one area and apply it in an area where we feel less certain, then we realize, we know a little bit more about this than what we thought. And we're able to think about it and become familiar with it and apply the knowledge that we've gained in life to this new situation.
So that goes back to your training to become a teacher. You studied Bloom's taxonomy of learning, and it's the ability to break things down into small pieces and then to reassemble them in a different area. It's very, very important to learn those skills, and some of those skills have not been taught or encouraged today. And so if you can do that, you're already ahead of the game.
That's right. Very, very much so.
And if you can't, hey, we'll help you. We'll help guide you along. I remember, Tom, one of your blogs, I think it was 2010. Yes, it would have been 2010, because we went to the Lake Tahoe area and we spent a few days in vacation there, and we rented bikes, got on the bike trails, and our youngest was 3 years old. So, of course, he's not doing a bike all by himself, but we got one of those trailers that hooked onto your bike so that he had handlebars to hold and a seat to sit on. And I remember he almost went to sleep because I was riding behind. Jordan, wake up. But I remember you chuckling when you told me that partway through the ride, Jordan said, "Daddy, it's easier when you're pedaling." And, he had his own pedals, but yeah, you were pedaling in the front. And he said it was easier when you're pedaling. And I remember you wrote that blog because you want to remind people, hey, we're right there to pedal with you. We're here to help you understand whole life insurance because you have what it takes to ride this financial path. You have what it takes to play the pickleball game. You just need some coaching along the way, and we can do that for you. We can help come alongside you and help you understand how you can be scoring.
That's right.
And win your game.
Of course, the Apostle Paul said that if you don't run the race according to the rules, you can't win. And that's what we're here for also, just to tell you the rules, because a lot of people don't know the rules we have to play by to win the financial game of life. Mm-hmm. They believe that it's something that has been tried over and over again, as maybe very popular, but just because it's popular doesn't make it right. Mm-hmm. If it was popular and everyone was doing it, then everyone would be wealthy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's right.
That's true. And so, as we tie principles and rules to a game or to a story, it helps us to remember those principles. Whereas if we just had a list of principles, I mean, how many of you have a hard time remembering a list of more than about 3 things to do, or a list of more than about 5 things to do? We can have a huge list, all that we want, but how much good is it going to do us if we can't recall those rules and put them into action at the appropriate time? So that's the value of tying some of these things to an analogy. Now, the rule book for personal finances, a lot of those principles come from the timeless truth that's found in the Bible. And that brings us up to your recent book, A Biblical Guide to Personal Finance, where you dive into some of those rules and break them down so that people can see, this is what this passage of the Bible can be applied to in daily life. And so you can get a copy of that book. Go to wealthtalks.com. You can get that book either on our website, there'll be a link to it there, or through amazon.com. Be sure to read that book and figure out how those timeless truths from the Bible can be applied to your personal finances. Thank you for playing along today with us as we applied pickleball to the principles of managing your money wisely.
And for all of you, don't get pickled financially.
That's right.
There is a way out. There is a way not to have to get pickled.
Don't get pickled. Be sure to get into that slow play so that you can win the long game. You're listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. Have a wonderful week.